If you're in your late 50s or early 60s and you're thinking about retiring, one of the biggest questions that you're probably asking is, should I go ahead and retire at age 60 or should I push through? Should I continue to work until I'm 65? And you've probably have heard all kinds of opinions across the board on this. Some people say wait until 65 because that's when Medicare kicks in. Others say if you can retire as early as you can, right? You can't get those years back. But here's the truth. The decision that you make, it really does matter. And it can have a lasting impact on your overall lifestyle, certainly your finances, your health, your overall retirement satisfaction. It's really all of these things. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break down the real difference between retiring at 60 and 65. And I'm going to walk you through a story here of a couple that faced this exact decision. So let's start with what shifts under the surface between ages 60 and 65, beyond just the numbers for a moment. First we have to talk about your overall physical energy and your health. Many people experience a noticeable decline in energy from their early to late 60s into their 70s and 80s and beyond, right? I mean, certainly the older that we get, generally speaking, our health tends to decline. We tend to have less energy. And activities that are exciting to us, perhaps like that big trip to Europe, maybe go visit 2 or 3 different countries while we're there. Maybe we're into hiking or road tripping or whatever it is. I'll never forget my grandmother, who was always a very positive woman, and she lived to be 102 years old. It felt bad. She wasn't doing a lot. And she said, really, I'm okay with it. I've done all these different things and I'm totally okay. I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do all those things that I wanted to do earlier. And that was at a time actually when my parents were going on a nice vacation. I'll never forget, and my grandmother was taking care of me. So, these are important things to consider. But let's also talk about the time freedom versus, time pressure. So you might be 60 years old, perhaps you're an empty nester, and maybe you don't have any grandkids yet, but maybe they're coming. They just haven't got here yet. And so now you're at a point where you might have, a little more flexibility, maybe with your time, maybe the ability to be a little bit more spontaneous. But maybe by age 65 or maybe older than that, maybe now grandkids have arrived. Maybe you want to spend more time now taking care of the grandkids. Maybe you want to be able to help out. Maybe your kids really need the help and you want to be able to provide that. And so that's something to consider. And the other thing that I see too that comes up is, you might be in your mid to late 60s or so, and maybe you've got parents that are now into their 90s and maybe they're needing more and more help. And so here you are, you're maybe helping with grandkids, but you're also helping now with your parents. And so there's a lot more, kind of involved. Another one is the emotional burnout. People often underestimate, how much 5 more years of work can wear them down. And I say that a little cautiously because for some people, you might just love your job. And maybe you work from home, maybe you have a great flexible schedule, you love your boss, you love what you do, whatever it is. And maybe you just never have the desire to stop working because it is such a great position that you're in, with flexibility and whatever else. But what I'm really talking about is, if you're in that position where you don't enjoy what you're doing every day, you're driving an hour to work, sitting in traffic, you don't enjoy it, don't like your boss, if you could afford to retire, you absolutely would, because it really is, weighing you down emotionally. And sometimes what I find is it's not you that notices it. Sometimes it's more the spouse that notices it. But these types of things, of course, they can affect your motivation, your physical health, and certainly, like with a spouse, your relationships, and really your relationships beyond just your spouse. And then there's opportunity cost. So the cost of working longer isn't just the paycheck that you're earning, it's the life experiences that you're now not having. You may still be young enough now to do the things that you won't be able to do later, no matter how much you have saved. And so these 5 years, right, 60 to 65, they could end up being the most active, the most flexible, the most high energy years of the rest of your retirement. Or they could be years, spending in a job that you really don't enjoy. All right, so meet Tom and Rachel. So Tom's 60, Rachel's 59. They saved a little over $1 million. Their mortgage is nearly paid off and they have no major debts. They've dreamed about retiring soon. They want to buy an RV. They want to do some traveling. They just want to spend more time outdoors. Tom's worried about health insurance. Rachel's not sure how long the money will last. I mean, really, they have these concerns and more. But at the end of the day, they're both really asking the same question. And that is, what would the difference be if they were to wait 5 more years? Could they afford to retire now, right? And so let's talk about the real trade-offs between retiring at 60 and 65. So we'll kind of break this down a little more detail. If they were to work 5 more years, of course, what that means is they wouldn't have to rely on their retirement accounts during that 5-year period. And at the same time, they could still contribute to their retirement accounts. So they both had 401ks, they could continue to fund those. Also, they could delay their Social Security. Now, you can't take Social Security at age 60. You have to wait until age 62. But there would be no point for either of them to take it at 62 if they were both still working because of the earnings test. They were making too much money and all of their Social Security would have been withheld. They would have got it back at their full retirement age, but there would have been no point to go ahead and take it then. The other thing is that it keeps access to employer-sponsored health insurance, which was heavily subsidized, meaning the employer was paying a big portion of that health insurance. Now, if they retired at 60, the obvious benefit, as we've kind of talked about, is, these are 5 more go-go years, so to speak. The go-go years are really your healthiest, most active years of your retirement. When we talk about go-go years are generally that time period between when you retire up until about age 75. And then between 75 and 85, these are like your slow-go years. And then at age 85 and beyond, these are considered the no-go years, right? These are very rough numbers. They're very much going to depend upon the individual, your health, how much you take care of yourself, exercise, right? But just kind of generally speaking, that's kind of how it works. The younger we are in retirement, we're going. Then we start to slow down a little bit. And then around 85 plus, we start to slow down quite a bit. And that's referred to, again, as like the no-go years. But if you retire at 60, you'll need your retirement savings to last longer, an obvious downside, right? The other thing is it's going to trigger the need for private health insurance up until age 65. Tom and Rachel were really wrestling with, it goes beyond just comparing the numbers. I mean, they were certainly afraid of retiring too early and making a mistake, or on the other side, retiring too late and then missing out on their best years. And then, of course, there was the very real emotional side of retiring. The uncertainty that comes with it, the identity, the fear of change. A lot of people don't know what they're retiring to. They only know what they're retiring from. And this is why it's so important that when you retire, you know what you're going to do on Monday morning when that alarm clock doesn't go off. On that first Monday, chances are you'll feel just fine. But over time, it's important to feel that sense of purpose. What do you want to be doing every day? What do you really want your retirement to look like? So here's what we did. So step 1 was lifestyle planning. Thinking through, what do you actually want retirement to look like between ages 60 and 65? What experiences might you want to have that would be harder to do compared to as you get older, that you wouldn't want to do when you're 75 or 85? Maybe it's going on that big trip to Europe, or that big cruise, or whatever it is. And then what we did was we did some expense mapping, and we broke down the essentials, what they really needed to spend. So these are things like housing costs, putting food on the table, utilities, right? All of those types of things. And then, what their lifestyle wants were. What were they really going to need on a monthly basis in order to give them, I should say, the retirement lifestyle that they would like to have. And one of the things that we did too was we built the healthcare bridge, because again, Medicare wasn't going to begin until age 65. So we estimated what the healthcare costs were going to be before then. And we looked at some different options. And one of them was, maybe one of them working at a job that maybe was a lot less demanding, but that they could get some good benefits, by doing that. Maybe working at a job that kind of felt part-time because they just weren't having to work nearly as hard, that type of thing. So that was one option. We also looked at, of course, what the cost of Cobra might be and how that worked. And we also looked at the ACA subsidies. This ends up shocking a lot of people that were typically high income earners throughout their working years. A lot of people don't even realize that they may actually qualify for these subsidies. And it's really all about just positioning your assets in such a way so that you can qualify. And this is the importance of having money that may be in after-tax accounts and also pre-tax accounts, because you can coordinate how much you're withdrawing from these different accounts in order to stay at different income levels, maybe before Medicare, in order to help get those income subsidies. And the next thing that we talked about was Social Security. For them, what we decided to do is to have Rachel go ahead and take Social Security at 62. This is now assuming she goes ahead and retires, because if she did take her benefit at 62 and she were still working, she would get hit with the earnings test, and her income was high enough that all of her benefits would have got withheld. Now, she would have got that back in the form of a positive adjustment to her monthly benefit at full retirement age, but they would have got withheld. It would not have made sense for her to take it then. But assuming they do retire, she would take it at 62, and she had the lower benefit between the two of them. And so the nice thing about her starting benefits early is at least it started to allow some income to start coming into the household beyond just the income that they would be receiving from withdrawing money from their retirement savings. And with Tom, he had the higher benefit. And so for him, we're going to plan to have him take his benefit at least at age 67, which is his full retirement age. We may have him take his benefit later. Every year that you wait after full retirement age, then your benefits do increase by 8% per year due to the delayed retirement credits. That doesn't count the cost of living adjustments, which are also added as well. And so that was kind of the thinking there, kind of a split strategy. The other reason that we decided to go that route is by delaying Tom's benefit. He has the higher benefit again between the two of them. And so when one of them does pass away, you're able to keep the higher benefit of the two. So that will make for a higher benefit for the surviving spouse. And the next thing was their withdrawal strategy. And so what we did here is we set up a bucket strategy that consisted of short-term money, medium-term, and long-term money. And the short-term money was really designed to help bridge the gap and help give them the income they needed until both of their Social Security benefits were to kick in. Now, even when both of their Social Security benefits started, they were still going to need to withdraw money from the portfolio, but not nearly as much. And so the short term was going to help bridge the gap until both their benefits were to start. And then the medium term money was going to start to kick in. And then the long-term money was still going to be invested more for the longer term. So think, out 10 years, 15 years or more. Now, here's some key questions to ask yourself. So first of all, what are your essential monthly living expenses now, and how might those change over time? And what's your health like, your longevity, and not just for you, but also for your spouse? And how is your portfolio positioned? Is it positioned in such a way in order to help provide you the cash flow that you're going to need all throughout retirement? Have you coordinated your overall retirement strategy, your investment strategy, with your other sources of income, such as Social Security, or it could be a pension or something else? Another thing to consider is, are you using taxable accounts, Roth accounts, or IRA funds, right? All of these are taxed differently. So understanding how these different accounts are taxed, when you should withdraw money from different accounts and when, depending upon, where you are within the tax brackets that year. All of this can be essential in order to help to minimize the total amount of taxes that you pay, not just this year, perhaps, but all throughout your retirement years. So making sure you have a good strategy for coordinating that all throughout retirement. So why do so many people stay stuck on this decision on whether they really and truly can and should retire? Well, I think it's a number of different things. One of them for sure is the fear of the unknown. Some people say things like, I'm afraid of what I don't know. And this is something that keeps people working longer than they actually need to. For other people, retiring feels like a one-shot decision. And that pressure can cause people to freeze. And quite frankly, that could be a very real concern. If you do retire, quit your job, and then feel like you made the wrong decision, could you find another job like that at the same quality, maybe same income, things like that, right? It very well is a legitimate concern. And this is, as we've talked about, the reason why we do the planning. Next, of course, is the fear of regret. Fear of regret keeps people from moving forward. You don't want to make a wrong move. So in the absence of making a wrong move, you just don't make a move. And this is something that I find keeps people continuing to work longer and longer, long after they actually want to and certainly even need to. And another thing is that people hear that you have to have, X amount of dollars saved before you can retire. My advice, simply put, is to ignore that. The amount that you need to have saved is going to be very specific to you. It depends on the lifestyle that you want to have. It depends on your health and your longevity. It depends on what your Social Security benefits are going to be. It depends on whether you're going to be entitled to any pensions. And then when it comes to retirement savings, it depends not just on the amount, but it also depends upon where you have that money saved. Is it in pre-tax accounts? Is it in after-tax accounts, for example? Look, all of this is really the importance of having a clear plan, because a clear plan is something that can really help to give you that confidence to retire and then spend your hard-earned money. With Tom and Rachel, they retired at 61 and 60. She took her Social Security at 62. He's probably going to start at 67. We'll figure that out later. But the plan is that we're using their portfolio. We've got a structured withdrawal plan to help create that monthly income. I talked a little bit about the bucket strategy that we implemented earlier. So we're going to withdraw a lot from that short-term money to help bridge that gap until both Social Security checks start coming in. For them, once they could see their plan on paper, and once they could actually see where their income was going to come from each and every year throughout retirement, at least based on all of our projections, this is what gave them that permission to go ahead and retire. And not just the permission to retire, but to retire confidently. So having the permission to retire, having that feeling that, okay, I can retire, I can not work, and also I can spend this money and truly enjoy myself. And, that's really what it's all about, if you ask me. And then, for them, because they felt that confidence, it gives them that chance to then say, okay, we can go out now, we can do the things we want to do. For them, they hit the road, they in their RV, they visited the family, they took long hikes, all these different types of things that were fun for them, and they had a lot more time to do it. Now, if you're feeling stuck with this decision, maybe you're thinking, hey, I'd like to retire now. I'm just not sure if I'm able to financially, or, maybe I should continue to work for a few more years. Go ahead and book a free strategy call with me using the link down below in the description. I'm more than happy to talk to you. We'll review your income. We'll talk about healthcare, Social Security, your lifestyle goals. I'll help you to make the smartest, most confident decision possible, one that you won't regret later. Look, don't retire too early out of frustration, and don't retire too late out of fear. There's a sweet spot here, and it's different for everybody. Again, if you're interested, click the link below, book your call, and I'll see you next time.